Well, hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of The Concession Stand here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and this is the review of Season 2, Episode 2 of Marvel Studios' Loki, currently on Disney Plus. How is everybody doing out there today? This is a exciting time to be a fan of the MCU. I am enjoying Loki season 2 thus far. These two episodes, or the first two episodes of this season, have been, dare I say, great. and that's not something that we have been accustomed to in the past couple of years when it comes to the MCU, and especially these Disney Plus shows. They've kind of dropped the ball as of late, and we've been suffering, man. We have been suffering, and this is a show that is true to form. If you're a fan of the first season, this second season is just as good. Now, I know there are those who didn't enjoy the first season of Loki. I've read some reviews. I've even talked to a couple of people who wasn't a big fan of the first season of Loki because that wasn't their Loki. And I get it. It's definitely a different Loki that we've come to know and love from Thor and Avengers and all of those. But it's still Loki. It still has that Loki flavor. And going into that first season, I really didn't know what to expect, because we've been on such an emotional roller coaster ride concerning the character of Loki, seeing his demise in Infinity War, and then seeing his, not resurrection, I should say, but his, him jumping back in to the MCU in Endgame. And that was a different Loki. That wasn't the Loki that we knew. This is a completely different Loki. You have to understand, the Loki that we've grown accustomed to technically died in Infinity War. And so this isn't that Loki, and that's what I was trying to explain to somebody after the first season of Loki on Disney Plus. I'm like, man, that's not the same Loki. And so you have to take that into account. But it's still, at the core, is Loki. And as we get into the second season, we're starting to see flashes of that Loki. It's not, all over the place. He's not the the god of mischief like he is in the comics, stuff like that. And even in the early films of the MCU, it's a different, it's a more subdued Loki. But in this episode, I felt, which is episode 2, entitled Breaking Bread, which is an awesome title for an episode. I thought this was the closest we got to the original Loki since the original Loki. So I really enjoyed Tom Hiddleston in this episode. I always do it. No matter how I feel about certain Thor films or him popping up in other properties in the MCU, I never had a problem with Tom Hiddleston's performance as Loki. And last season, I thought he should have been nominated for an Emmy. Honest to God, he really did an awesome job. And he was born for this role. To think at one point he was close to being cast as Thor. Initially, he auditioned to play Thor, but it didn't work out. But he was good. So they like, well, I tell you what, here's Loki. Let's see what you could do with that. And the rest, as they say, is history. As I said before, season 2, episode 2, entitled Breaking Bad, or Breaking Brad, should I say. Not the TV show Breaking Bad, but Breaking Brad. We find Loki and Morbius on the hunt to find Sylvie. And we open up in the year 1977 on the sacred timeline where Loki, Morbius, and B-15 arrive in London to track down the location of X5 and hopefully find Sylvie. After seeing her in the future in last week's episode, Loki is more determined than ever to find her, but instead of finding Sylvie, we find X5, who is now taking the identity of a movie star named Brad Wolf. And while Loki and Morbius try to get the truth where Sylvie is, we go back to the TVA and we find OB, who is freaking out about the fate of the temporal loom. And meanwhile, back in 1977, Loki and Morbius, they track down, or run down, should I say, Brad Wolf, in a nice little scene with Loki flexing his powers, and they end up apprehending Brad Wolf, who is portrayed by Raphael Casal. Look, stole the episode as Brad. He stole that. It was a reason why it was called Breaking Brad. It was Brad's episode, and well, I'll get to that when I get to the end. But the performance that he gives, going toe to toe with Loki, going toe to toe with Morbius, and just, I mean, it was a mixture of Hannibal Lecter, of Silence of the Lambs, and dare I say, Joker. From the Dark Knight, Heath Ledger's Joker. I mean, it was perfectly written and directed. The interrogation scenes between Brad going toe to toe with Loki and Morbius. Love those scenes. If the whole episode was that, I would have been like, oh man, this is great. But we still got more to go in this episode. It told so much in an hour, and just under an hour. Actually, it was only 50 minutes long, this episode. But man, they did such a great job. We eventually get to Loki being able to break Brad, and he reveals where Sylvie is. They go back to 1970. No, it was 1981, 82. They go back to the 80s and go to this old McDonald's. And it was funny to watch it. You see the old uniforms, the old color schemes in the old McDonald's. If you're old enough to remember how it looks, it was fun to look at the prices on the board behind the cashier and just remember days when a hamburger cost $1. Well, less than $1. It was like, I don't know, 50 cents. Now ketchup package or 50 cents at McDonald's. But anyway, that was a nice reunion between Loki and Sylvie. We find out that General Dox has went on this mission, this little side mission, to prune the timeline, to basically blow up the branching timelines and wipe out millions of lives. And Sylvie and Loki and Morbius, they attempt to stop her. They did stop her, but not before she wiped out a few timelines in the process, if not all of them. It looked like she knocked out a vast majority of them at the very least, going by that monitor. And it was heartbreaking the way that played out. I mean, especially B-15's reaction. Oh my God, that was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. And she's looking at the monitor and she's like, those are lives. Those are lives. And it was like, oh man, the weight of that. It was just soul crushing. Now, honestly, I wasn't expecting that. Awesome performance by Wanma Musaku. I said I was going to attempt to do her name today, and then I still end up butchering it. I'm sorry, but yes, the actress that plays B-15. Awesome performance by her. And early on, we get a little hint to what's going on with Miss Minutes, why Miss Minutes isn't there, and actually she's working behind the scenes to override I guess you could say the systems to whereas they can't track Renslayer. And so we have that. And when we get to the end of this episode, they finally get a beat. They finally get a signal as to where Miss Menace is. So there's a perfect setup to where we're heading going forward. But this episode was so well done, well directed, well written, well acted. The only problem I had was the scene where Loki, Sylvie, and Morbius goes to that warehouse where General Dox is launching this attack on the time branches, and it just didn't feel right. It felt thrown together. It felt like a scene that they were like, we need more action in this episode. Let's do this scene. They just threw that together. It just didn't feel organic. But other than that, I mean, I did enjoy the episode. I mean, as far as that scene is concerned, I understand why it was there. You needed that scene there to kind of move the plot forward, but I just didn't like the way it was kind of executed. But the rest of the episode was beautifully executed. It was well paced. It told a lot of story in 50 minutes. It really did. It was a movie's worth of information given here. It didn't feel, just thrown in expedition. It was really just flowed. And I really, really enjoyed this episode. Also, I want to give a shout out to the composer here, Natalie Hoyt, who this score, she did the score last season, and she basically does the score for the entire series. But this episode score was just banging, man. I mean, it was just she hit all the emotional beats this episode. I was just like, I was in awe the entire episode. And great job by her. Absolutely loved it. Look, season 2 has a lot of potential. And going off of these first 2 episodes, I am super excited. I haven't been this excited for MCU property. I mean, I can't think since WandaVision, maybe. I am super excited going forward in this show. I wasn't this excited about the first season of Loki, and I enjoyed that. But this has so much potential. I'm praying that it doesn't let me down. As a reminder, I'm not grading this episode. Didn't grade last episode. We're not grading until the season finale, where I will grade the entire season as a whole. But I would like to know, how are you feeling so far about Loki season 2? Are you enjoying it? Are you not watching it? Are you done with the MCU? Or do you feel like you was burnt? You've been burnt the last year or so with all of this foolishness that's going on in the MCU. Can't keep up with it. You're oversaturated, whatever the case may be. I would like to know your feelings thus far. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also look up the show on all social media platforms. Just look up the KB Radio Network. Don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel. And like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this recap of Loki Season 2, Episode 2, entitled Breaking Brad, currently on Disney Plus. Can't wait to speak to you next week when we review Episode 3. Want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love everyone. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.